what is your first name and where and when were you born?
Okay, my first name or my full name?
Full name.
Okay. My name is Wanda Faye Jackson Lewis, and I was born in Tuskegee, at Tuskegee Institute at John A. Andrews Hospital. At that time, I still lived in Auburn, Alabama, on West Glen Avenue. At that time, Lee County, what is now East Alabama Medical Center, was Lee County Hospital, and it was segregated. And so that's why, most African American babies in this area were born at Tuskegee, in Tuskegee at John Andrews Hospital, unless they were, born at home or whatever. I am the oldest of 3 of my mother's children. I have a sister who is 4 years younger than I am, and a brother who's 16 years younger than I am. I grew up in a single-parent household, but my grandmother lived with us, and so I never lived with my father, although he was in my life. I visited him, and he lived in Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, and I visited him as I was older. And in my adult life, we became very close. But my primary growing up and my primary training really happened with my mom and my grandmother and my great aunt, who lived, my grandmother's sister, who lived just kind of right down the road from us. And so we were just that small family. I always wished that I had a lot of cousins, and I wished that I had an older brother, but it was just us. But the fact of the matter is, I do have a lot of cousins on my father's side. Now, so I went to school in Auburn. I went to 1st and 6th grade at Boykin Street Elementary School. 2nd through 5th grade, my mother was a school teacher, and she taught school in Opelika at Carver Elementary School. And 2nd through 5th grade, I went to school with her. And then in the 7th grade, I came back to Auburn. I went to Drake High School 1 year. That was my 7th grade year. During that whole time was the whole civil rights movement going on during all of my growing up years. And in fact, my 8th grade year, I transferred to what was then Sanford Avenue School. Freedom of choice had come into play, and my mama chose for us to go and be a part of integration. Little did I know that, and that was just the 2nd year of freedom of choice. Little did I know that some years down the road I would meet one of the 3 brave students, meet and marry one of the 3 brave students who were the first to integrate Auburn City Schools. And that is my husband. And I'll talk more about him later. But anyway, so that whole freedom of choice thing came into play. 8th grade through 12th grade, I was at Sanford and then at Auburn High School. Give me a question.
Yes, ma'am. You mentioned living with your grandmother and your great aunt. What was your family like growing up? And of course, you mentioned how your family was. Yeah, what was the family life like?
It was good. I mean, we were loved by our parents, my mom, my grandmother, and my great aunt. I just remember. My grandmother was home during the day, when we were in school. And so I remember coming home to a good home-cooked meal all the time. She always planted a garden. She and my mom planted a garden every year. And so there were always a lot of fresh vegetables, and they did a lot of canning and freezing vegetables and making jellies and pies and those kind of things. My grandmother baked a lot too. She loved to bake. Every Sunday it looked like she baked a cake. But anyway, and Sunday dinner was always a big Sunday dinner. My family was a very Christian family. We went to church. We went to Sunday school every Sunday, and worship service We were very involved in churches. As growing up, I was in the youth choir. I was on the Ursha board. We went to Vacation Bible School. My mom was very involved in the church as well. She a lot of times did a lot of decorating for Easter, and she was in charge of the Easter programs, and we did Easter speeches and all of that. So life was, we thought life was good then. And like I said, my mom was a teacher, my grandmother, and my great aunt was a teacher. So I grew up in a very well-educated family. They had all graduated from college, and also at that time, I guess, my family would have been considered one that was a well-educated family. So education was always important to us, and there was no question about, the fact that we would grow up and be successful in whatever it was we chose to do. Our neighborhood was, as I say, I grew up a block from the campus on West Glen. It doesn't look anything like it did when I was growing up. But our street was called the Back Line. There was a back line, and then there was a street in front of us that kind of between where we lived and Highway 14, which is now Martin Luther King Drive, and the railroad track. The railroad track kind of divided the city, I guess you could say. And the street that was between us and the railroad track was the front line, and we were the back line. It was just, every neighborhood in the town had a name, seemed like. But anyway, we played from one end of the street to the other end of the street. And each end of the street had like a field where we would play ball, or we'd play ball in the street, or that kind of thing. I remember when our street was a dirt road, and then I remember when they paved our street. But anyway, my childhood was a fun childhood. It was a good childhood. I was relatively shy as a child, though. People don't believe that now when I tell them that, but I was a shy child growing up. But anyway, that was kind of my growing up time.
Fair enough. What were the names of your parents and of your grandmother, grandparents in general?
My grandmother's name was Lottie Mae Woolfolk. My great aunt's name was Leona Brooks. As I said, they were sisters. And then my mom was married a couple of times. So my mother was Bertha Lee Woolfolk Jackson was my maiden name, and she later married my brother's dad, and Willis, and so her name when she passed away was Willis. Yeah.
Gotcha. Did either of your parents and your grandmother, I'm assuming they all grew up in Auburn, but did they grow up in Auburn?
Yeah. My mother was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. So, and this is as I recall, my grandmother moved to Ohio to work, and I'm thinking she met my grandfather there, although he was from the Lochapoka area, but he was there in that area, and of Ohio, and she met and married him. My mom was born there, and then I'm not sure what happened, but my grandmother ended up moving back to Auburn, and my grandfather passed away when my mom was, I think, like 12 years old. So I never met him, and so my grandmother never remarried, and so basically my grandmother and my aunt raised my mom, and she was an only child, and my aunt didn't have any children, so our family was really relatively small. She would be very happy now, because right now our family is a large family. But anyway, it's a much larger family. But anyway, she was always wishing she had brothers and sisters and whatever. And we often wondered, and she would, that's one thing I wonder if I'll even find as I'm searching, if my grandfather may have had another family at some point. But yeah, so they were, as far as I know, they were all born let me say, in the Lee County area. So it's still questionable about, as I was talking to you about the land earlier, Auburn city limits has expanded over the years. So the area where the family land was or is was not considered inside of the Auburn city limits. So, but in this area, yes, they were all born in this area.
Gotcha.
Except my mom wasn't born here, but she came back, but grew up here as a child, yes.
Gotcha. That is honestly very interesting to know. And was your grandfather a good bit older than your grandmother?
I don't know. And I think a lot of times now about things that our grandparents, my parents and grandparents talked about. As kids, younger folks, we didn't really we heard it, but we weren't really hearing it, and so a lot of questions that I have now, I think, but did they even say anything about that? Or I wish I had asked. There are questions that I wish I had asked. It's kind of like now I'm saying about me writing, documenting the history about our family that I can, because I feel like one day, even if my children who are full grown now, and my grandchildren don't want to know or are not interested right now, one day they might be. And I just hope that I can think of enough answers to put down so that maybe there'll be answers for some of those questions that will come up later.
Hopefully so. There's always hope. I think
Yeah.
I might be able to.
Yeah, but I don't know how old he was. And I don't know how I don't know how they were when my grandmother when they got married. I haven't run across anything that gives me that information. So.
They would have been married in Ohio or Alabama?
Well, that I don't know for sure. So that would be something I'd have to figure out. Yeah, because I don't know whether they were married here or there. But I know what year my mom was born, so I need time to just focus on it takes some time. That takes a lot of time.
It really does. You had mentioned the back line. I think you mentioned the back line. How close was your neighborhood or your house to Draketown?
Ooh.
Because I know that was a whole area, and I was wondering how they kind of interconnected.
It was, I don't know how the distance is, but we used to walk there. I wouldn't do it today.
Fair enough.
But we used to walk to Draketown because we knew kids who lived at Draketown, Summer Hill, those areas. But we used to walk. Oh my goodness, if I was thinking from where, I would think maybe 2 miles, 3, I don't know. I should walk that now. But it seems like such a long way now. But then we do it, as kids, we do it just to go see our friends or whatever. But in terms of how they were connected, I don't know that they were connected, but in the community, people were connected. And people visited neighborhood to neighborhood. People knew folks who lived in all of the neighborhoods. And different areas were known for different things. I don't know, Summer Hill, when I say Summer Hill, I'm talking, now Summer Hill is interesting because Summer Hill half of it is on one side of Opelika Road, and that was old Summer Hill. Then the other side, Summer Hill, where Pitt Street and Ebenezer Baptist Church and all that's a whole nother part of Summer Hill. Summer Hill now is on the other side of Opelika Road. Looks nothing. I don't even know if any. I need to ride through there because there's so much new development over there. I'm not even sure there are any houses that are still there that used to be long time ago.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I just really, when I think about it, I've come down Harper, and I just can't remember seeing any houses that used to be there, but I have to drive through and just look. But anyway, we used to, like I say, Summer Hill, we used to go up there for street parties. That was just fun things that we did in the summertime. It was like, they would always have street dances up in Summer Hill, up along Summer Hill. Spencer Line You know about Spencer Line? You hadn't heard of Spencer
I
Line?
have not.
You know where Drake School is?
Mm-hmm.
That area over there where those homes are. And there were some women there at the meeting, the NAACP event. Doris Hutchinson and Gwendolyn Tinsley. Anyway, they all grew up. See, we were all kids growing up together, and they all lived over in the Spencer Line, what was called Spencer Line area, and from Drake School. And that was like, you know, there were different ball teams in different communities. So, you know, Spencer Line would come over to the back line and play. You know, we were just. It was a real close community when I think about the African American community of Auburn. We really didn't pay any attention to what was happening anywhere else.
Understandable. What was your neighborhood called?
Well, it was the back line.
Just all the back lines?
Just all the back line.
I wasn't sure if it had like a specific like extra name or anything like how Draketown does.
No. It's interesting because all those streets over there, none of those streets over there, you know, that's not the name of the streets over there. There were, like I say, different areas, Spencer Line, Summer Hill. Now there's a Summer Hill Road. There was another area, what can I think? The Quarters. Off Bragg Avenue, Bragg, those streets up Fraser Street, those streets over there, that was called the Quarters. I don't know why it was called the Quarters, but it was called the Quarters. And then, you know, there were public housing communities, which back then was called the projects, like Moulton and Drake and Ridgecrest.
Moulton is still there.
Moulton is still there. Drake Apartments are still there on off of Foster Street, and then Ridgecrest Apartments out Donahue over to the left. If you go out Donahue, I mean, you leave campus and you just cross railroad track and you just keep going until you get over to Sugar Jordan, and that's Donahue, and the apartments on the left there before you get to Walmart, whatever that is on. But anyway. But that all used to be when I was growing up. There was nothing out there. That was outside the city limits when I was growing up. So it's just a lot. I've seen a lot of change.
Sorry, I'm trying to think of a good follow-up question to that because that's really good. Were there any? I'm gonna ask a few more other background questions really quick. Then we'll kind of jump forward a little bit more. Were there any stories kind of more generally passed down through your family, just really Auburn related stories, or just kind of anything that kind of sticks out in your memory?
A lot of the stories that I remember had to do with, I guess, family kinds of things. One of the tradition, I say it was a tradition in our family, and I think this happened, I remember my mom saying it happened when she was a child too, because at a point, you remember the land that I keep talking about? My grandmother and my great aunt grew up on that land. And then, but my mom grew up not on that land, but on property that my great aunt lived in, which was kind of on the front line, if that makes sense at all. But she talked about when she was a child, how her grandmother, my grandmother's mother, whose name was Anna Mae Floyd, my great grandmother, and her mother, and her aunt. Well, how do I put this? My great grandmother, my grandmother, and my great aunt. They used to walk out onto this property. Now that's a good little stretch. From where they lived to out Richland Road, down that road, because they didn't have a car at that point when she was a child, down that road, and then back off of the road, probably half a mile or so or more. But they walked that property, just making sure that wherever the stakes or the fences or whatever they had put up to maintain their ownership was still there. Now, they did that when my mom was a child. When my sister and I were growing up, we did the same thing. And then they would tell us stories about things that, the home house set over here, and there was a creek, and there was a creek with and there are a lot of rocks around out there, and they would talk about stories and things about their growing up, out there. But the interesting thing is that they would tell those stories. My mom had the same walking experience. When my sister and I were born and were growing up, we did the same thing. Every year, 3 times a year, we would go out there and walk that land. Now, by this time, Mama had a car, and we would drive as far as we could drive out there, and then we would get out and walk. But also, Mama used to go out and shop. She would go get our Christmas trees, chop our Christmas trees down from out there. Mama said that when she was a child, they would go out there and chop her Christmas trees down from out there. When now my children, my daughter, my son will be 45 here in a few weeks. My daughter just turned 42. I have to think, okay, how old are these kids? My daughter's never walked on the property, but my son has, and he go out and hunt. He's been out there so much, and he's taken a deep interest in that property. And he spent a lot of time out there just looking at it, thinking about it, what can happen with it, all of this. But he hunts out there a lot too. So it's interesting when I think about kind of how that tradition has kind of passed down. And here, back about a month ago, our whole family came together here in Auburn. And we spent the weekend together. And one of the things that we did, because we took everybody out there, from the youngest grandchild, in this case, great-great-great-grandchild out there. So my grandchildren got to put their feet on that property. So I guess when I think about stories and traditions, and then we told them stories about our going out there. So that's something that's kind of been passed down, and the value, the importance of that. And I'm bound and determined to figure out how that property originally came into the family, because that's what I don't know.
That is incredibly important and incredibly special.
Yes, it is to me. And before I die, but anyway, that's one of the stories. They used to tell us stories about as kids. My grandmother, about how but everything they did, it was hard life, but they told it as if it was, I don't know how to say it. I say joy. Joy is not. Anyway, it was like it was special. It was special. If they were chopping wood, or they were doing whatever they were doing, or they were roasting whatever, how they were cooking, whatever, it was special to them. It wasn't like there was anything, they didn't know anything different, I guess, is what I guess it amounted to. It's like my children will talk about things that we did when they were little, and then we didn't have any clue that it was meaning that much to them. A picnic we went on, for example, that I didn't remember what the menu was, but they remember. My daughter remembers every bit of the menu, kind of thing. But you never know what kind of sticks with folks, and how memories are made. And it's some memories. That's why history is so important, because it gives people have memories, and it's important. One thing I remember growing up too as a child, one thing that we did every year at Christmas time. Well, a couple times a year, Mama would take us we would go to Montgomery. We went like in spring around Easter, and we went at Christmas time. Easter, we would go down and we would shop at, I cannot remember the name of the store. It was in my mind, and all of a sudden now it's gone. But we would shop for our Easter dresses. And I remember two particular Easter dresses. One was they were lavender, and then the other ones were like a lime green, that we shopped and got those. And my mom used to teach away from home too. That's the other thing I need to mention. Let me put a pin in that and come back to that, because that goes in another direction. But back to the trips to Montgomery. At Christmas time, when we go down there was this shopping area. It's called Normandale Shopping Center. Have you ever heard of it?
That sounds familiar.
It's gone now, but anyway, now Normandale Shopping Center, and they had this high thing built up, and Santa used to sit up there, and that's where kids would go up and talk to Santa, tell him whatever we did. But I just remember going to Normandale, and there would be Christmas decorations and lights and all that, and that was just such a special time. It was just going to my right now. That was also the time before we could eat in whatever, any restaurants, whatever, my grandmother would pack a lunch. We would have fried chicken and homemade biscuits and peach preserves. That's what I remember. That's what I remember. And we would stop. Back then, it was before the interstate was built. So you go on 29 down, what is that, College? You can go College, and it takes you on into Tuskegee. Well, it's Highway 29 is what it is, but it's College Street if you stay on it and keep going. It goes directly into Tuskegee. And then there's Highway 80, I think, that would go off from Tuskegee on into Montgomery or whatever. But anyway,
like that, yeah.
That's the way. But there was a park on the side of, like a roadside park, and that's where we would stop and have our picnic lunch.
I'm trying to orient myself. I want to say the one I know that was different spot.
Well,
Fraser's Park.
Where is that now?
Fraser's Park. I want to say like closer by the mall. So I think this is a different one. I'm thinking of.
Yeah, that's a different.
Yeah,
That's a different one.
What was the?
If you were leaving town, if you were on College Street and you went down past Jim and Nick's and all that stuff, and you crossed over the interstate, Chihuahua State Park. You know what Chihuahua is? Okay, Chihuahua. You turn off to the left. You keep going straight. If you go far enough, you'll run into Tuskegee. So that's the road. That used to be the only route to go to Tuskegee and to Montgomery. There's a road that turns off, Highway 80. There's a road that turns off, and I think it crosses back over the interstate at a point going down there that will take you on into Montgomery. But that road will take you straight into Tuskegee. But anyway, we would stop somewhere along there. There was a roadside park, and that's where we would have our picnic lunch. And those are just memories that I have of that. And Mama used to tell stories about them. You know, a lot of her stories had to do with her trips out. We called it out home. Is the term we use for that area, and how, you know, growing up as a child, how her childhood was and how she spent her time. My grandmother was a seamstress. That's another thing. When we were growing up, she made all of our clothes. She made my mom's clothes, and she sewed for us and for people in the community too. My grandmother did a lot of things. She was a very talented woman.
I believe it.
Very talented woman. She cooked well. She sewed well. She canned. I don't know where she found the time and the energy for man. But anyway,
some people can seriously do it all. I'm always impressed by them.
She did. She was. What's that? I'm every woman. That song. that's I'm every woman. Yep. That was her.
Did your mom or your grandmother or even your aunt ever take part in the NAACP?
When we were growing up, all of them were in the NAACP, and so were we. we were card-carrying members of the NAACP. Yeah, they paid and we went to meetings. Meetings in the neighborhood. I don't remember a lot about those meetings. I do remember along about the time when, I remember the voter registration drives and all of that, but you know, it's all like a fog to me. I remember it all happening. We were young, so early on, not a lot about it. By the time I got to high school, and you know, like I say, we were all in the integrated schools and the lunch counters and everything else that Auburn had that they were not offering. We were into that, and there were voter registration drives going on then. NAACP meetings about how to address those things that needed to be addressed. So I remember one meeting. This wasn't NAACP. This was another organization, I think, that was hosting this. But you know, there was this. You know, different groups would come to town. You know, trying to really kind of engage people in the community in taking actions that needed to be taken on things that needed to be addressed. And so, but NAACP, yes, we had memberships. And then in my grown-up time, my husband Morris was the president of the chapter of NAACP in Auburn.
What years was he president?
That is what we're trying to remember. And it had to be It had to be when the kids were young. My son was born in 78 and my daughter in 81. So I'm thinking it was somewhere between probably the 80s, and somewhere in the 80s. And I can't remember exact years. Somewhere there's a newspaper article, and I couldn't put my hands right on it because I've got so much stuff that I have collected over the years. But I remember saving a newspaper article that was a picture of something about the NAACP. And if I find that newspaper article, I can find a date, But anyway, at that point, I remember us still getting at home the Crisis magazine. And I don't know at what point we stopped getting it, kind of thing. And something, I don't know, it kind of went away. NAACP just kind of fizzled out here after a point. And I really don't remember there being a president in Auburn after Morris. And I'm not sure what, I don't know.
Not have been. I can't remember the exact year. I should have pulled it up so I can remember it. But I remember at some point, some year, oh Lord, I want to say it actually before the 70s. Should have pulled it up. I remember it being a ban at some point. Like the government was trying to put a ban on the NAACP in Alabama.
I remember it got started back up. I remember some people who were presidents in my childhood or in my maybe teens or somewhere in there. And then I remember Barbara Pitts being president at a point, and then Morris was president after Barbara Pitts. But I don't remember after Morris. I just don't remember. And I don't, like I said, I don't know why it just kind of went away or fizzled away or what. I don't know whether people stopped being interested or what the reason was that it kind of stopped. And then here, a couple of years ago when I realized, that it was starting up again. And I don't know how long really it's been started up. I just kind of heard about it, I think, maybe a couple of years ago.
I want to say that Mr. George Allen mentioned that his brother Billy had started up in 2020 due to current events that needed addressing.
So that's why I see like it's only been a couple of years that I've just kind of started. And I wasn't really sure it was for real. I guess when I heard it, I thought, I don't know. But and so anyway, that is when I knew about it again. But like I said, we used to get the Crisis magazine when the kids were little. Oh man, I'm trying to think, did they ever have membership? Courtney especially, surely they did. It's just that I just remember they were really, really young. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't as involved then as Morris was, because that's why I know the kids had to be, they must have been really young when he was young, because they don't really remember anything about it. So like I say, why it stopped and whatever, I don't have any idea.
Do you remember any of the names of presidents before Barbara Pitts?
Miss Ann Higgins, yeah. I remember she was the president. In fact, it seemed like to me she was president. She might have been a president a long time. I don't know if Mary Brooks was ever a president or not, but I know Mary Brooks might have been as well, but I know Ann Higgins was. And like I said, she is the one that I remember the most, the longest.
Do you remember?
I remember other people who were part of the NAACP. Give me a minute. Okay, Mary Brooks, Susie Giddings, Miss Juanita Hughes might have been. I don't know if Ralph Foster was or not. These are people who were in the community who were Mr. Raymond Stubbs. Does that name ring a bell to you?
It does not, but I also haven't seen too many of the names outside of the people who I met the other day.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, what's her name? Doris Hutchinson was Doris Talbot back then. Gwen Talbot, but she's now Gwen Tinsley. Frankie Hill, that was Barbara Pitts. That's Barbara Pitts' sister, Frankie Hill. Who were some other people? Lindbergh Jackson. He passed away, but now his son is around, but I don't know if he was ever. I can't remember whether he was ever a part of the NAACP, but I know Lindbergh, his dad. Lindbergh Jackson Sr. was on the Auburn City Council at a point. But I wish somewhere there was some minutes or roster or something, and I don't even know who would even have that.
I would have, of course, I would have no idea, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's kicking around in the basement somewhere or attic or.
Mm-hmm. It's probably
somewhere.
It probably is. And like I say, if we could ever, the newspaper is just not. Anyway.
The newspaper is a whole nother.
Yeah, the news. Let me just tell you, I was going to do for my husband's 40th birthday celebration. I was going to do this whole "This Is Your Life" thing. So, and one of the very key events in his life was the integration of schools. He and two other young people. So I went to the school first to see if the school had anything, school system had anything in, and the year that they integrated schools, they say that the Tiger Tales, which was a school newspaper, was not published that year because the guy who was the advisor for that went into the military or something. They had nothing. I went to Auburn Bulletin. They had nothing. Or like Auburn News had nothing. I went to Auburn University. I'm saying, how is it that the city can have schools integrated and there be no recorded history of that by any publication? But I'll tell you, Auburn, the loveliest village on the plains, has always, how did they just try to keep everything so quiet?
It's not the loveliest village. It hides part of its history, and it's never been the loveliest village because it was built on the backs of horror and terror. That's a whole other side tangent.
But anyway. So my point in all of that is to say that chances are, you would hope you could go to the press to find archives of newspapers, something, but it's not there.
Yeah.
It's not there. I searched for that. I'm thinking, how in the world do you hide that your school system was ever integrated? Now, if there were unpleasant parts of that, and there were unpleasant parts of that that you don't want known, but it's history. Mm-hmm. It is what it is, and man.
That is why I've included a few questions on integration, because I wanted that to be, because I know you're a large part of it, and I wanted that to be recorded at least a little bit, just so it exists.
Right. Well, his experience was what it was, and he'll relay that, I'm sure. It was not a comfortable time, because it's amazing to me when I look at kids now, and I work with young people. That's been the majority of my career. And I look at young people now and I'm thinking, how can young people have and express the kind of hate that was expressed to us when we went to school? Spitballs thrown, names calling. And I know that it happens now. We got bullying and we've got our own pretty ways of antagonizing people, but it's just the same on social media and all of that. But literally name calling and spitballs. So kids have to be taught that. And so I'm thinking, I cannot imagine sitting at my house teaching my children to really hate another person that way. I never told my kids, go to school and hit this person or spit at this person or put your foot out and trip them up in the hall. And these are things I'm saying, put your foot out and trip them up in the hallway. Or when they come down the hall, part the waters. It's like part of the Red Sea. Everybody get back again. It's just, those are the kinds of things that happen. But, even worse for me, and this is of all the teachers that I had in school, I remember the ones I liked the best and the ones that were the worst. And there's only one teacher. I can think of a couple that I enjoyed their classes, but the worst one is one that I'll never forget her face. And she was she was an Alabama history teacher. Imagine that. And whenever I raised my hand in class, she would never call on me. She'd ask a question, I raised my hand, she'd never call on me. And if I didn't raise my hand, and usually then if I didn't raise my hand because I didn't know the answer, that's when she would call on me. And so I finally got wise to the fact I'm just not going to ever raise my hand, so she won't know whether I know it or don't know it or whatever. And to the point where then she'd call on me, and if I knew the answer, I knew the answer, and I would give her the answer. But I'm saying that kind of thing, where a teacher just purposely tries to embarrass you for no reason. It's so interesting because as I grew up, became an adult, and got into my work and career and everything, she and I ended up in the same education sorority together. And I wondered if she remembered then. But anyway.
It'd be interesting if she did remember. Did she treat you any different as an adult?
Oh yeah, she spoke. I think she knew who I was. I think she knew who I was.
I hope she felt some remorse.
I don't know, but we never talked. I mean, I spoke to her, and I never had sat down and had a conversation with her kind of thing. But we spoke, and she was cordial. Now here again, I was the only African American in that education sorority. But it just when I saw her, when I went in and I saw her, I thought, man, time, how much time had passed, and here we are now, on the same level. But that's life. But I don't know, she's passed away now, but I just wonder if she reflected back on that. But anyway.
What was the involvement of the NAACP in the integration of Auburn schools, if you know?
I don't recall the NAACP being involved in any way. I don't recall any organization being involved. Now, because I know when my mom, when my mom and Mars's mom and folks decided to send their kids, to me, it was just a decision they made. It was freedom of choice. People had the option to go. We had to find our own transportation. They weren't running buses to pick us up or anything like that. Because I remember that my sister and I and some other folks, we had to hire. My folks had to hire a cab to take us to school. But not until they started to really. And Auburn did it gradually, in terms of integrating. They integrated the lower grades first. And they got to a point where then they were going to close Boykin Center, because some kids did go after integration. They did have some grades that were all going to Boykin kind of thing. But anyway, but I don't remember there being an organizational effort of any kind to integrate the schools. If it was, somehow or another, I didn't. It wasn't anything that was we were involved in, I guess. I haven't thought about something else I was going to tell you about. Maybe it'll come back to me.
Hopefully it
I
will.
wish I had said it when I thought about it, but I was saying something else.
It's okay.
I talked about lack of transportation.
You mentioned the cab.
I was going to tell you that, and I don't know if I mentioned this to you, that my class, I know what it was when I was talking about how they gradually integrated the schools. It took a long time now that I think on that for that to happen too. But I don't know if it was that long. But anyway, my class of 71, was the first totally integrated graduating class from Auburn High School. And it was a class of 71. And what happened was the kids at Drake went through their 11th grade year. Now they had the option. I think they were given some were invited to come on that year. But then, because they didn't want to kind of do it all at the same time for some reason, I don't even know what that was all about. But anyway, but they had gone to Drake their whole high school experience, and then ended up. And I know it had to happen somewhere. I mean, it had to happen somewhere. But there was a lot of resentment about that. To this day, there's still resentment about it, to the point where some of those students have never attended Auburn High School class reunion. Never. And I know this because I've oftentimes been the only African American, and me and my husband, at the events. We celebrated our 50th class reunion 2021, and there were more African American students at that one than any other one, and there was still not a black male there, except Morris. he tends to be but I mean, it's not his class, but I think in a sense it makes sense that he's there because he started the whole thing. I mean, it's like, if anybody's gonna be here,
it should be him.
It should be you. Yeah.
Fair enough.
And then he's got to go because I'm there. So.
Yeah. Fair enough.
But if anybody's going to be there, I wish that the other fellow who was a part of the first three, he doesn't live here. I've forgotten where he lives, but he would have been in my class. But he's never, Ernest Walker. But he's never been to a class reunion back. Well, wait, I take that back. I think he came to the very first one, that 10-year reunion, or 5-year reunion, or whatever. But since then, he hasn't been to one. And then Gwen Carlisle is the other student, and she lives in the Atlanta area, and she and her brother and Mars are very close, so they've been buddies since they were little. So anyway,
the reason why I asked if there was any involvement is because I almost assumed there would be, but it's kind of interesting. Do you know how it got started, how they were able to get it that first integrated?
Evidently I don't know if the federal government or the state or whoever, I think the federal government must have said it was, they had to offer freedom of choice. Nobody did it out of the goodness of their heart. But so I'm thinking it was a federal something. I can't even imagine that the state did it. It had to have come from the federal government.
Yeah,
but that's why I'm thinking it wasn't like there was a required, I don't say it didn't require any local NAACP action, but that I don't recall any of that at that time.
When integration happened, was it only people going to Auburn High School, or was there any mandates of both so I'm from Auburn High School going to Drake?
There was never a mandate of that. Now, what did happen with the younger grades when they started integration was when I say the grades, they started having how do I say this? And I don't know what grades those were that went to Boykin, but there were some grades that totally integrated there at Boykin. But I don't remember what those grades were. But there was never a mandate for anybody to go to Drake. Freedom of choice, somebody could have chosen to go to Drake if they wanted to, but nobody chose to go to Drake.
That doesn't surprise me in the slightest, sadly, but I was just kind of curious because I had seen so much of, going there.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, what about the opposite way?
No. And see, what would have been probably an easier pill to swallow was, as I think back on it, is if they had said, okay, in the 11th grade, we're gonna totally integrate the 11th grade. So then by the time the total integration happened at the 11th grade at Drake, this town would have burnt down. That would, anyway. But anyhow, if that had happened, then there would have been total integration at the 11th grade level, and then and it happened at Drake, and then your senior year, everybody comes to Auburn High. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It could have happened that way.
I honestly think it could have happened a bunch of
it could have happened a lot of ways. It could have happened
better ways too.
It could have happened all at one time, but
people don't like to, and by people I mean white people, they don't like things to be forced on them.
Well, and true. And the thing of it is too, when you think about it, it was always that we had to make the change. And when we had to make the change, we lost a lot in that situation, because a lot of the resentment came because, I was in the band. Like I said, I'd been over there now since I was in the 8th grade, so I kind of gotten acclimated to the situation. I had some folks who I call themselves my friend, but I was a little more comfortable with the situation. There was still a lot of racism that was happening, but that was folks that I learned how to manage through that. I was in the band, so that whole nother, the band is a whole nother family of folks, if that makes sense. I'd been on camp. I'd been to band camp. We used to go up to Roosevelt State Park or somewhere for a week for band camp. All of that. But when time came for total integration, and another thing, at Auburn High, you tried out for the band. You just didn't just go join the band, pick up an instrument and join the band. So the students coming from Drake had to try out for the band. Well, a lot of them didn't want to do that. And then those that did, of course, things had not been equal in terms of training and opportunities, and some of us, I took private piano lessons, but not everybody could afford to have private trumpet lessons or saxophone lessons or drum percussion and all of that. So people came, although they played and they played well, but they didn't come up to the standards of Auburn High. So what do you end up with? You end up with very few African Americans in the band. So basically, Drake's band, just cheerleading is another area. The cheers over here are different from the cheers over here, but we got to adopt the cheers over here. We can't bring them together. We can't take these. We can't. Anyway, so a lot was lost there. Majorettes. You got to be in the band to be a majorette. You got to try out to be a majorette. And I tried out, and I was there, and I tried out, but I never got twirling lessons outside, so if I didn't get twirling lessons, how was I going to learn how to twirl the baton and make the majorette squad? So I'm just saying, all of that, it's like we gave up so much, and it was just had to be okay.
On that kind of same respect, what was your day-to-day life like? You mentioned a little bit of that one really bad teacher, and of course the band. What were some other aspects that kind of stick out?
The band was my favorite place to be, because the teacher, the band director, Mr. Tommy Goff, was fair to everybody. He was fair to everybody. I spoke at his funeral services too, just because I felt like I needed to say something about him and his fairness. But anyway, had it not been for the band when I was in high school and Morris Lewis, I don't know, is how, I did okay in my subjects. I was not a bad student, but when I was at Drake in the 7th grade, I was an all-A student. When I got over there, not so, because a lot of things were playing into it. There was a teacher who didn't want me to be successful. And then, I'm nervous about whatever and feel like all of that affected how I performed. Like I say, it was just different. And so like I say, I don't remember a lot of joy in high school with the exception of the band. That was my favorite place to be. Like I said, I just kind of went through and got my lesson and got out and graduated and got out of there. It seemed like I was in a club or two. I have to look at my yearbook and see what those were. It seemed like it was an education club or something. I don't know. I really don't remember any details of what went on in there. So it wasn't like I was in a drama club or anything like that. Now, by the time my sister came along and some other folks, they were cheerleaders. My sister was a cheerleader, and another friend of hers was a cheerleader. And they by this time, it was 3 years after I graduated. So they're kind of, it's totally integrated. And, they kind of getting their place, or what's it, taking their place, I guess. This is what's happening. I remember we walked out of, they had the same, what was it, Key Club, Calendar Girls, or something like that. And the students, I don't know who selected the Calendar Girls, but there was this one girl that we had a neighborhood meeting one night and chose who we wanted to have as our representative as the Calendar Girl, and submitted her name, whatever the process was. And we said, if she doesn't, her name was Judy Mitchell, if she does not make the Calendar Girl, or somebody black make the Calendar Girl, we're walking out of the assembly. So it was going to be orderly, we were going to do it, and true enough, they got to the last one. Not one. So we stood up, turned around, walked out of the cafeteria, and went out and sat on the steps at Auburn High, right out there outside. Because we knew we were going to be in trouble, and we knew the principal was going to whatever. Anyway, so then he wanted to call folks to the office. We had spokespersons who were going to be the people who would go and speak. And they went and they said what the protest was all about and everything. And so, but we didn't get expelled from school or anything. I mean, we were orderly, and we just said, okay, here's what we're protesting. And whatever this process is needs to change so that we can get some representation.
Who were the spokespeople? Do you remember?
I can't remember who they were now. I need to ask somebody, because I cannot remember. But anyway, and the person who we were selecting, beautiful girl, she was smart, she was in the band, she played the flute, and it was somebody, and we selected somebody we knew it wasn't like you could say, well, her grades aren't there, or whatever, you know. And I remember, and see those neighborhood meetings like that, that's where you would have thought the NAACP or somebody would have been involved. But these were just like parents in the community who came together and said, you know, and they gave us guidance about how to do whatever. And I clearly remember those meetings, you know, but we had a lot of those about different things. There were things we felt like were unfair or not whatever in the community. But I don't remember there being an organization like that was kind of the driving force behind that.
Were any of them involved in NAACP or their families?
Probably, may have been. I just don't know.
Yeah.
I know.
I was asking because I was thinking, even though the NAACP wasn't directly involved in it,
it could
has
have
like outside influence.
It may have had. It very well may have had. It very well may have had. And I just may not be remembering that.
Yeah, which is perfectly fine.
I just may not be remembering that way. However it was, there was some guidance provided, and I'm pretty sure that people were there who had been a part of planning things like that. There was another organization, I mentioned the Voters League, NAACP. This other one was it wasn't Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC. I don't think it was something else.
I remember Mr. Doris Hutchinson at one point in the meeting mentioning Auburn Freedom League.
Auburn Freedom League, yes, that was it, Auburn Freedom League, which may have probably been more of the activist type, whatever. Like I say, Auburn, and that's why I can't, like I said, the NAACP, as I recall, was a quiet arm, if that makes sense. Not that I'm not saying, the fact that I just don't remember a lot of action there. Not like, you can read about NAACP very actively involved in some communities. Very actively engaged, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't remember that in Auburn.
It sounds like to me that it was potentially influence, but just quietly and throughout multiple different members having their own small involvements, but not, if you think like directly, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I just cannot remember that. And like I said, Doris is older than I am. She's a couple years old, a year or two older than I am. But I know she and those folks from Spencer Line, when it came down to involvement in protests and marching and whatever, my mom wouldn't let us. I mean, they were involved in stuff, but they were not trusting to let us go and get arrested, kind of thing. They didn't, and so when Black Lives Matter stuff came up, dead in the middle of 2020, I said I couldn't do it then, but I can do it now. So we were marching out. We were downtown Auburn with our signs and everything, Anyway, yeah, I think it was like everybody was involved in everything. I think that's probably what it was. So probably being able to separate the lines of, it's like we're not talking about but so many people.
Yeah.
And so many people who are going to be involved in the first place. So probably everybody was a card carrying member of everything. And so it was hard to say, okay, this is this and this is this. But I don't know, like I say, as kids, we were drugged. If it wasn't church-related stuff, it was community-related stuff, and we had to go to all of it. We had to go to all of it.
Fair enough. I remember there also reading somewhere that there was also a Auburn University chapter as well, the NAACP, or at least a little something about Auburn University being involved.
It may have been now. Let me think. When I was at Auburn, like I said, that may have been an NAACP Auburn University chapter. I don't recall it, and I wasn't there that long, so that's a whole nother part of my life we hadn't even gotten to. We probably won't get to. It's not even important. I mean, it's important, but
fair enough. I just remember seeing it, so I was going to see if you knew anything about it. And also bouncing back on mentioning of downtown. During the very first genealogy workshop that I had, I was the part of Miss Johnny Dowdell. Mm-hmm. She had mentioned that she and someone else, and I wish I could think of her name right now, had mentioned that downtown Auburn was very segregated. It was a place you did not go.
Oh, I'm telling you. Mm-mm.
How much can you speak of that, and how much do you remember?
What I remember about downtown Auburn was the Tiger Theater, and in the summertime, we would save RC Cola bottle caps and Golden Flake potato chip bags. Don't ask me what but that was admission to the Tuesday or Thursday. One of those days, we would walk to the movie theater. But the theater was, it was separate. Where we sat in the theater was separate from where other folks sat in the theater. There was no eating area. Nothing. All the kind of restaurants or cafes or whatever that we went to were on the west side of town. Miss Ella White's, the Tasty Shop, up in the quarters, there was up in the quarters of Bragg, that area. Bragg Avenue, the area, there was what was that? There was another little restaurant kind of place up there.
Was it a greasy burger place?
Something, I cannot think of the name.
I remember a whole different story that one of the ladies told me. It was something like Krusty Cafe?
I cannot.
Something cafe.
But it was something like that up there. But the Tasty Shop was there on Highway 14, and that was where we went a lot. The Dairy Queen, which used to be over on Opelika Road, I remember on the side of the Dairy Queen, there was a colored water fountain. It was literally, and they tried to get it off of there at some point, but it's like the paint would never completely erase it, even after they supposedly took it away. But it was there when my daddy used to come to town. He used to take me up there to get an ice cream. I remember that. And that water fountain, that colored water fountain was on the side there. In later years, in fact, my senior year in high school, there was a music shop downtown Auburn, over there where behind the glass is, somewhere along in there, Herbert's Music Store was over in there. That's where Mom bought my clarinet. And, but we didn't go, there was a Crest 5 and Dime store down there. Anyway, I don't remember a whole lot of time downtown Auburn. Like I said, the movie theater was on there, but it was nowhere down there that I recall ever going to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Not until I got older and Santa Fe, we could go to Santa Fe's and Dairy Queen and those places. The very first time I remember going to a restaurant in Auburn to sit down and eat with my family was Holiday Inn. Used to be out, what is that road? College? No. At the end of College? I get Shelton and College mixed up. Yeah, at the end of, they call it the Ball. Which one is it at the end? Anyway, there used to be a Holiday Inn out off 280. And for Mother's Day one year, my mom took my grandmother, we went out there with my grandmother, and we had dinner out there for Mother's Day. And that's the first time I ever remember going anywhere to sit down in Auburn to eat. And that was a long time ago. Anyway, that was really a long time ago. But yeah, I don't remember a lot about downtown Auburn, except, like I said, the theater. We walked to the theater. We would walk when Drake High played football on Tuesday nights, because on Friday night, Auburn High played football in Felton Little Park. That's where the football games used to take place. And we would walk, the neighborhood, everybody, you could, lines and lines of people from the back line, the projects, the front, everywhere, all over, walk to Felton Little Park for the Drake's football game. And everybody black folks sat on one side of the field, and across the other side of the field were Auburn University students. And when I think about this now, it just bothers me. But anyway, Drake's band would always, at halftime, a part of the halftime show, at the end of that halftime show, they would turn and go there and march and play War Eagle to that crowd that was sitting on the other side of the field. And they would, but they were there for the football game. But anyway, but everybody enjoyed that Tuesday night walk to the game. But I'm thinking about, we go to the football game on Tuesday night. We had to go to school the next day. But we couldn't play on Friday night. We had to play in the middle of the week.
I take it as probably because of segregation and hopefully with stereotypes in downtown and going to the football games and just everything. Do you remember any either major or minor involvement that the NAACP had in Auburn?
I just don't remember.
Yeah.
Honestly, I thought when I was sitting there on Saturday, we were up there, and I'm thinking, I just don't remember NAACP involvement in any kind of, now that's not to say it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But in any kind of major things, except that Martin Luther King Park thing. Mm-hmm. Did I tell you about that already?
You have.
Okay, let me back up. And that was a collective thing, but that did happen while on the watch of while he was president. That used to be the location of Old Lee County Training School. Mm-hmm. And they tore the school down, and so it was just kind of there. And that's a historical site, having been the oldest black high school. Well, it was all grades, because my mom went to school there. Mm-hmm. It was 1st through 12th grade until they built Drake and Boykin, But anyway, school was, of course, gone. But they wanted to maintain that site. And there was a suggestion to put a park over there. Well, the city said, that the community needed to raise the money to build a park. And does the community raise the money to build all these other parks around the city? Wherever you get money from to build all these other parks, the city needs to do this. This needs to be a city park. And so long story short, I guess what I would say is that the efforts, our momentum to drive that forward, to get the city to really buy into creating a park there, to maintain that site as a historic place, came through. That came through and out of the NAACP. That's the only thing that and I guess I remember that because of, like I say, the timing that it happened. But there may have been other things. I'm trying to think. I wish so much you could talk. Well, Doris will have a good bit of information, but the other person, and she lives in the Atlanta area now, is Barbara Pitts, and she is a walking history book. So somebody needs to talk to her. I don't know if there's a person assigned to her or not. But
I don't think there is, but I will happily bring it up and say, hey. Yes,
I think that's the person who will be able to, because I understand she's the person who told somebody they need to contact Morris because he was one of the presidents. So, but I think anything historical wise, she would be the person who would have a good bit of information about that. I just don't recall the NAACP's name attached to any kind of major thing other than I just know that effort came out of that. And like I say, NAACP here, unlike in some other communities where there's a lot of visibility, that just kind of hasn't been the case. I saw something the other day about some lawsuit or something that's happening over in Opelika, and the NAACP has taken a stance on it with a person who's she's on the city council, but the lawsuit I think is something with the county or something like that. But other than that, I haven't heard of anything else.
Understandable. I wonder if any of that kind of plays a role in. You mentioned earlier that your mom didn't really want you to be involved in the actual marches. I wonder if that could have influenced how your brain remembers things.
It could have. It very well could have, because we never, when the marches were taking place, and the sit-ins downtown Auburn, and those things happened. Mm-hmm. I don't know the NAACP was behind that, and Doris can tell you that. But no, we weren't involved in those. I think it had to do with our age, and here again, we were girls, and Mama. I mean, it was just women there in the house. It wasn't like, and Mama was a school teacher. I think all of that probably played into it. As I think about it.
And also the other groups and organizations you mentioned could also have roles in different things as well, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. Do you remember any of the marches or sit-ins or both that stand out to you, or big or small or whatever?
I knew that they were happening. Mm-hmm. Nothing really stands out necessarily. I remember hearing that some people were arrested, but nothing that was a major kind of thing that I can recall. The thing that is funny, because it's not funny either, but on Martin Luther King's birthday, I can't remember the year it was. Now, this was after we were full grown and everything was integrated and whatever. But something blew up downtown Auburn when the Copper Kettle blew up.
Kettle, yeah.
Copper Kettle was a place that was known to be very racist, and that was also one of the main city-in places. But when the Copper Kettle blew up that day, people's minds immediately went back to how that was a place where, folks tried to sit in, probably folks got arrested from, and that kind of thing. But anyway, yeah, the Copper Kettle was right there on the corner of what is that, Gay and Magnolia. Yeah. Anyway, where are we on our list of whatever? Get me.
Yes, ma'am. Touched a little bit on Auburn NAACP. I do want to ask a couple more questions on Auburn NAACP. because I do want to ask a couple more questions on the like Auburn side, and then kind of touch on Opelika in Lee County, and also touch a little bit more on your background in NAACP involvement.
I don't know when. I
mean, like when you started, you like what year you started?
I don't remember what year. I just know when I was a child.
Fair.
I just know when I was a child that my mom, my folks were very involved, and they involved us as children.
Yeah.
But I don't know what year that was. I don't even know what age I was.
Fair enough.
So.
Fair enough. But yes, we already crossed it.
Mm-hmm. And as far as NAACP in any other areas of the county, I have no idea about those.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry.
You are perfectly fine. I just mostly just like wanted like to touch on if you happen to, I'm sure you said, happen to know like any of the the history, like beginnings of a couple things, which you just already said, which is totally fine. But there was just a couple of those little questions, and I really think we did, cover that a good bit from what you know, which is, of course, perfectly fine.
I know a lot about the community as I have grown up in it. My personal experiences, I know kind of about, I've done a lot of relating with the city government and in terms of my business kinds of, my career kind of work.
And I also would like to ask you more questions on that too, because that's important. I would love to be able to kind of document more about Auburn from that time, because like
so I've worked with a lot of different agencies across the community, just in terms of work, organizations in the community, that kind of thing, but not so much. I guess when it comes down to a lot of activism kind of stuff, this community is not. It doesn't happen. I mean, I don't even know no other way to say it. I mean, usually what it's kind of like with that sign, some an individual or a few individuals will address something, and it either gets something, either happens about it or it doesn't. And usually, if it does, it happens, it's done, it's over. But no big deal about it, kind of thing. I know when the Boykin Community Center, there was a big. Now this was a different group. This was I need to ask Morris the name of this community. This was another community organization. It was not NAACP, but it was another community organization that really fought to maintain the Boykin Community Center, because after the schools were no longer using it, they were getting ready to probably demolish it or let it run down to whatever. But then there was a strong effort from the citizens of the community to maintain that building, turn it into a community building of some sort, and it now is thriving. I mean, there's a lot of different agencies in there. They're getting ready to expand it, as I understand, all of that to maintain the integrity of the building and to maintain the history of the building. Same thing with Drake. There was a class of students, former students of Drake, who just took information over there to the school about the principal of Drake, a former principal of Drake, historical stuff, pictures, that kind of thing, so that there's history that stays there. So that's kind of how things happen around here. They're just, people just kind of see a need, address the need, and let's be that. I'm sorry we can't give a ton of credit to the NAACP for whatever, but if it's not there, it's not there.
Yeah, it's not there.
It's not there. So, and I heard that. Now, I do think corrections need to be made in the existence and who was a part and that kind of thing. But if people have that information, can get that information. But in terms of kind of waving I don't mean this in a negative way, but in terms of trying to create something that's not there.
And that's why,
I'm just honest about it.
Absolutely.
And I hope that that's not the effort. But I hope if there's something there, yes, it needs to be known. Because if I don't know it, it's a lot of folks don't know it.
Yeah.
I'm just sorry, but
And that's why we're asking, because it'd be better to assert that this didn't happen. This is how the town was, and this is how you remember it. And here's like a little bit of the beginning piece of who people who was involved in it, and also that's why I'm like touching on integration and Auburn, because you can talk on that, and then some of the other like historic sites and such, because that information is still important. It's still important to the story. Like you said, little bits and pieces of people working on something or not working on it the way it should be.
One thing about Auburn and Opelika, because I heard something that I wondered. Somebody said that there was never Auburn NAACP, and I'm thinking, who in Opelika could say that? But who in Opelika is old enough right now to be able to have known? Because I would, as a child, I would not have known what was going on in Opelika. So people my age in Opelika may not have known what was going on in Auburn. You see what I'm saying?
I remember Mr. George Allen actually touching on that when we actually spoke with him. He said that people in Opelika, and they didn't know what went on in Opelika. They didn't go. They didn't know what was going on in Auburn. They didn't go to Auburn. People in Opelika didn't go to Auburn. People in Auburn didn't go to Opelika. And
the thing of it was, there has always been, I don't even know when this got started, but I understand this was on both sides of the fence, black and white. There's always been some type of a rivalry between Auburn and Opelika.
I went through high school. It was always Auburn versus Opelika.
Right. And I don't, wherever that came from. But I'm just saying, like I said, well, George, perfect example. I mean, George would not have a clue as to what was going on in Auburn when he was a child. I don't have a clue as what was going on. What was going on. I don't know what's going on in Opelika. But I can't say that there was not NAACP in Opelika in my childhood, because there may have been. I know Miss Perla Mae Hutchinson, I think is the last name of the person.
Sounds so familiar.
I knew her because my parents knew her, and they had. I know she was politically involved. If you want to say politically involved, she was an activist and actively involved. What exactly she did and where and what, I do not know. But I knew of her because my parents knew of her, and I remember visiting with her. I remember her name. They were family. They were friends. She was a friend of the family. But I can't tell you what her community, everything was. But I'm just saying, I wouldn't make a statement to say that it didn't happen, because I don't know that it happened. So that's the only thing I would say as this process goes forward, that people be fair. That's why I'm being honest about what I know and don't know here in Auburn, because like I say, it could have been something going on I have no clue about. Excuse me, I feel like I would. But anyway, I was trying to think of anything. Integration. Mm-hmm. I know the integration in Opelika was different from Auburn. So there are some people in Opelika, and I don't know if this person is part of NAACP or not. Henrietta Snipes.
That name sounds familiar.
Well, Henrietta Snipes, she was, I know, one of those earlier on students to integrate schools over in Opelika, I believe. I'm trying to think who else. But I know that folks have probably talked to Patsy Jones, and Patsy she graduated from Darden, but she was on the city council and all that. But here again, she may, those folks probably have more information about what things that were going on over there. But they can't speak about what was going on over here. So anyway.
And then what goes on in both places kind of gives both sides of the story a little bit, just because they're both important, of course.
Yeah. But Opelika came to Auburn to play ball, and Auburn went to Opelika to play ball, and beyond that, that was pretty much it. Yeah, and the boys, I do know, it was like, growing up, somehow or another, Auburn boys were like Opelika girls, and Opelika girls were, vice versa, whatever. And that was always a contentious area for whatever reason.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I remember being told about Drake versus Darden and having those kind of games and all that fun stuff.
That was a thing. It's kind of like with Opelika High and Auburn High. I mean, that was shoot. It was, and you know, they at a point. I don't know. This was when my kids were in school. My kids graduated from Opelika High, but it was like at a point they stopped having the Auburn. What did they do? Something about the games at a particular time because they didn't want fights to break out. There used to always be a fight.
Yeah, there was always a fight when I was going. You mentioned earlier about the taking the cab.
Mm-hmm.
How was that set up, and what did you think of at the time?
There were cab stations around, you know, like different locations that had people in the community drove. There were cars, there were personal cars, but they charge a fee for drive, which wasn't much at all when I think about it now as compared to Lyft and Uber and such. But I don't know, they may charge 25 cents or 50 cents or something to go from here to town, the grocery store or somewhere. But I don't even remember I don't know how much they were charging to take us to school, but there were several of us who lived in the area that were going to Sanford Avenue. Well, I went to Sanford and my sister went to Dean Road, I believe. But she was, like I say, she's 3 years younger than I am. And so the cab would pick us up our parents would make arrangements with the cab drivers, and they would pick us up and take us to school and pick us up from school in the afternoon and bring us back home. That was the extent of it. And it was okay. We were people that we knew in the community, and that went on. Let's see, I did that in the 8th grade. What did I do in the 9th grade? I'm trying to remember if I rode the cab to school in the 9th grade. Maybe by the time of 9th grade, they may have started doing the bus route by then, because they had started to, let me back up, because all of a sudden I'm remembering we were carpooling with some people then, I think there were some different folks in the community, parents of somebody that was driving and would drive us to school. And then by the time I was in the 10th grade, Mars, he was driving then, because he's like 4 years older than I am. So I was in the 9th grade. He was in the 10th grade when I was he was in the 11th grade when I was in the 9th grade. He ended up asking me to the prom that year. That was my first date. And so I started riding to school. He would pick me up in the morning, and we'd go to school. He picked me and my sister up, and we drove to school. And he did that his 11th and 12th grade year. And then when he graduated, by this time the bus was running. So the bus would pick up at Drake. Yeah, we had to walk over to Drake to get the bus.
Huh.
Yeah.
That seems very far out of the way.
Yeah. We had, I'm sure, because the bus didn't come down our street.
Huh. Okay.
It may be almost a mile. It may be about a mile.
It's less it's still on the way.
Did the bus come to Borkin? I didn't ride the bus a whole lot. Because I'm trying to think my senior year of hours. I can't even remember my senior year, how we got to school. I know I rode the bus some, but I don't remember driving the bus all the time. So somebody was driving. I don't know who was driving by then, but somebody was driving by then.
Fair enough.
And that's how we got to school. But yeah, so they had started running buses all around town by my senior year. They had to because with all those kids coming from Drake to Auburn High, I think that's the year that they probably started the full bus route.
When you were riding the bus, do you remember how the treatment was on the bus? How?
I don't remember the bus being integrated. Okay. Not because, like I said, most of the folk coming to my side of town, there weren't any. It wasn't an integrated situation that I recall. Like I said, I don't remember riding the school bus a whole lot. But I don't, because that area, I mean, Kerry Woods, it would just depend on, I guess, who was living where. I don't know what the bus route, I don't know how they drew the lines for the buses then. Now, it's, they got 1 million school buses in 1 million different neighborhoods, and people, and the communities are more integrated now. So, but that was not the case then. So it would have been that the buses would have seemed more segregated, unless that you were looking at somebody who may have lived. Let's see where. I don't know, but like I said, the communities were still very segregated by the time I graduated from high school. They were not. I mean, now they're not as integrated as they could be, but they are far more integrated now than back then.
I would assume that people, the more white side of town, would buy Auburn High School, for example, at the time.
Yeah. In fact, yes, because and Kerry Woods. Mm-hmm. Now, Kerry Woods has always been an area that was, more whites lived in Kerry Woods but see that this side of town, behind Auburn High, the old Auburn High, the junior high now, that area, all this area on that side of town was more of the white side of town, and then that cross on the other side of the track, railroad, on the other side of the railroad track, was more the black side of town.
When the buses arrived at the school, were they forced to go to a separate entrance, a separate side of the school, or was it?
I don't remember. I'm pretty sure they had a place that they had to come into, but nothing was as organized as it is now. I mean, right now, you buses come to one side of the school and cars come to another. But I don't remember that.
With integration, did they have any separate entrances, or
what?
For the high school, or I guess anywhere really, but for the high school?
You mean separate entrances for the buses? Or
for students? Basically, if they kept anything still separate, and then they're integrating, they kept anything separate. That's what I'm mostly curious about, just like how, if there's basically any more pushback during integration time.
I don't remember separate entrances, no.
That's good.
I mean, no. When I get at lunchtime, I mean, people pretty much segregated themselves. Lunchtime, everybody kind of was still in their same little cliques or whatever during the lunch periods. I'm trying to remember when we went to like assemblies, if we were required to sit with a class. I can't recall that. You're talking 50-something years ago. I mean, I remember some stuff, but that little insignificant stuff, not so much. Yeah. But I do, we still had our set, everybody. And I guess now kids still, they got their cliques. They said lunchtime they sit with who they sit with. But we definitely sat on different sides of the cafeteria and that kind of thing. That's how I met my husband. So.
Fair enough.
Sidebar.
So yeah, I think that might be a good place to end, because I can't think of any other questions. If you can think of anything else you'd like to add, I will happily include.
I may think of something later, and if I do.
If you do, I will happily record it, either writing it down or record it in general.
Yeah.
Recording.
Oh.
You're good.
I kind of hinted at Auburn University a little bit. I didn't say much about. I said something about being at Auburn. I don't know, but anyway, I went to Auburn. I graduated from Auburn High. I wanted to go to Tuskegee. That was my great grand desire. But I had applied for Tuskegee. I applied for Auburn. Applied to Hampton. I'm not Hampton. Yeah, Hampton. But anyway, that was going to be too far away from home. My mom thought yes. But I applied to Tuskegee, got accepted at Tuskegee, and went down and had enrolled and got in my dorm room and all of that. Got back home that afternoon, and in the mail was a letter with my acceptance letter for Auburn University. We immediately got back in the car and went to Tuskegee and unenrolled me. Because Mama wanted me to go to Auburn University. And, wasn't my desire, but you have to recognize the time. And here again, I'd been part of integrating Auburn City Schools, so of course she wanted me to be a part of that whole Auburn University situation. And I did. And it was, I was really, lost is not the word, I don't know, just felt very inferior, intimidated, I guess, is more the word for being there. It seemed like a large campus then, and when I look, and a lot of students, and there were a lot of students, but I don't know how many students were there. It couldn't have been that many. Not compared to like now. You're talking 30,000 students over there now, whatever it is, but there still were. I could go all day unless I went to a certain place on campus and see another black student and not see a black student. I don't remember a black student being in any of my classes. I was in, history classes were like 300 students in the class, that kind of. Anyway, long story short, I went to school at Auburn. I was not a very successful student at all. So I went through this whole thing of academic probation, off and on academic probation over whatever time until they decided at a point that they were facing me on academic suspension. And then did that, and in that between time, I worked I worked a full-time job at Opelika High School as an aide. And then Sears opened over at Auburn Village Mall opened, and then Sears opened. And
I went there a few times before it closed.
Oh, okay. So anyway, and so I went to work there, got a job there working in the audit department. And while working, I really, really liked what I was doing in the audit department there. So I decided when I was going to reapply to school again, changed my first major. My major was going to be in special education at Auburn. But anyway, but I hadn't gotten even anywhere to the point of taking any of those education courses because, you in freshman year, you're taking all this stuff that you really don't need. But anyway, that's not going to be effective, impact your major. And so I worked in the audit department for a while. And then this guy came in who had graduated from Auburn, majored in accounting. He was an accounting major. And I had to teach him everything about he was going to be doing in the accounting department. I reapplied to Auburn, changed my major to accounting.
Fair enough.
And so went back and was in there rocking along for a while. I took several business courses, which I liked the business courses, except for accounting, the accounting courses. Didn't do so well, and then there were some science courses I had to take. Anyway, long story short, I'm back in this thing of probation and whatever. But the last time I was on suspension, I didn't know what I was going to do at that point, and got a job working at Auburn Daycare Centers as a secretary bookkeeper, and I worked that job for 14 years. But in the process, I learned a lot about advocacy for children and families, and really enjoyed learning, because not only was I became office manager there, not only was I doing that, but I was learning about local and state agencies that help support families. I was learning about regulatory agencies, places that provided, like State Department offices and stuff, people that we had to interact with because of the job, the role that I had there at the daycare center. Anyway, long story short, I just became very, very interested in anything and everything that had to do with making the quality of life better for children and families. So life goes on. I said 14 years there, and then my children started to come along, and I wanted to be able to be at home and spend more time, be available to them to go in when they, by the time they went to school, to participate in their school activities and excuse me, and support them in what they were doing. So I quit that job and started to do a lot of contract work. So I worked for did some contract work for East Alabama Mental Health, for another daycare center here in the community, with my son's school. I was involved with the PTA, and they ended up getting this grant. They were writing for a grant to RJR Nabisco. And one of the things they wanted to do was to create a parenting component to get more parents involved in school. Well, I was already there. I was president of the PTA, so they asked me to, give my input. Long story short, I ended up setting up some parenting programs there over Opelika City Schools. All the while, I'm still wanting to get my college degree because I felt like everybody in my family had one. My sister had one. By the time she's 4 years younger than me, okay? And so I'm feeling like I have not been successful at doing this. And so I started doing some coursework at Southern Union. I did some coursework at Troy State, but never really 100% focused on that because I'm still working and doing stuff, like with the family that started. Anyway, I ended up, while I was working with Opelika City Schools, there was a person who was teaching at one of the schools that I worked at. She became a principal down here in Auburn, and she then started beckoning me to come to work with Auburn to do, and I thought, okay. So anyway, long story short, they gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. I took the job at Auburn and worked Auburn for 3 years, and in the meantime, I had started this cultural enrichment program in the summer, really so my children would have something to do in the summer, and other families who wanted their kids to do that were things that were focused on helping them to learn more about their African American culture. So we started this summer cultural arts program, focusing on the arts, and the thing grew. I was doing that in the summer when school was out, and we had at one point 100 kids enrolled in the program. Well, and at the end of every summer, the kids would do a performance so it would be open to the community to see, and they would kind of showcase what they had learned in the summer. Well, there were these people that attended the program, who saw the program, heard about it, and they were on the board of directors for Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Lee County. They invited me to apply. They had an opening for executive director. They invited me to apply. And I really wasn't all that interested in that because I enjoyed what I was doing and having my summers free and all that. But anyway, I said, well, okay, I'll come and look at it kind of thing. And I did the first time they asked me to come over. And I applied, and I didn't get the position the first time. I didn't get the job. They hired some colonel or somebody. I don't know. But anyway, well, that didn't work out for them. And so the next time it rolled around, another board member came to me and said, really, Wanda, consider it. I said, well, okay. So I submitted my resume again and went for an interview. And I was fine. If I had gotten it, I was fine. If I didn't get it, I was fine. But it was, here again, was an opportunity for me to expand what I was wanting to do with children and families, I thought. And so anyway, applied for the job, got the job. And I knew then, okay, I said, I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to get this degree. Because one of the things that had me nervous was the fact that, everybody looks for somebody with a degree to do a job. I mean, that's the first thing they ask you on the thing. But anyway, they were cool with it because they saw I had done some college work, but they were more basing what they wanted on what they saw me doing in my work in the community. And so, went to work there. Long story short, I had a 22-year career with Boys and Girls Clubs as CEO for Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Lee County. Still kind of off and on, getting some coursework in there. But I never focused enough on me to get that done. But it was always a piece of unfinished business for me. And I always still felt inferior when I would be I mean, I had traveled all over, everywhere, meeting and greeting and presenting and facilitating workshops, but there was a missing piece. So I retired in August of 2019 from that job, and the first thing on my agenda was to get my degree. After 50 years it took me to get my degree, and I ended up getting it through a program. I was driving back. This is like during the last few months of me working. I would leave home every morning, and I'd get in a particular spot, and there was this advertisement that would come on the radio. It was talking about an external degree program through the University of Alabama. And I thought, that sounds interesting. I need to look into it. Well, I didn't. Another morning went by, another week, I guess, or so went by. I heard it again. I need to look into that, but I didn't. The third time I heard it, in the same spot every morning, I thought, I have to look into this. And I did. I looked into it, applied for it, was accepted. And so when I finished my work at Boys and Girls Club, I spent that next year, which ended up being 2020. I ended up spending that year finishing my degree. And I got it online after 50 years. I was so looking forward to being able to walk across stage, but I was afraid. It was during the pandemic, and I thought,
basically 2020 happened.
Well, it's whatever. That's the only good thing that I got out of 2020. And so I did that, and so my big celebration was at home with my, and really my family didn't even come. My daughter set up this whole thing where she had, I don't know, somebody she knew. My daughter's an attorney, so she knows folks everywhere. She had this woman set up this thing, and it was like Zoom, but it was like, whatever. But anyway, I don't even know what platform they used. But there I had friends from all across the country. People I had met through Boys and Girls Club, friends, childhood friends, local and everybody was there the night that they did the graduation ceremonies at the University of Alabama and announced my name and all of that. I'm sitting in my office at home with my cap and gown on, the whole thing. I got pictures of it and all, but I'm saying all that to say, starting out at Sanford Avenue School, insecure, all of that, coming from Drake, having been a student, having always been, I never had problems with my academic work, but things started to just kind of not go well there. And I feel like once I got to Auburn, it was compounded by the mass, it was still segregation going on then, to some degree. But it was like, even more so with me being the only one in the class, not feeling comfortable and confident to go and get help from the professors or wherever I needed to get help from to help me to be successful in my schoolwork and all. But it took that career, the career itself, I think, walking through and going, and every step of the way, all of those experiences that I had through the work and through getting it. And I said, having experience working with so many different people in the community, different agencies and all, really helped build my confidence. And so, like I said, I needed to be able to, but I couldn't make myself focus on me. It was all about all these other, I had like 6,000 kids that came through that club over those years that I got to know and feel like maybe had some impact on them. But, so I needed to tell you my education story.
It's an extremely important part of your story, an extremely important story to hear, and I'm glad you told me.
There was somebody that I was sharing that with one day, just kind of casually. We had just met, really, and she was kind of getting to know. And I was telling her that, and she started to tear up part of the way through, and I thought, what did I say? What's wrong? She said, continue, and when you finish, I'll tell you. And she was telling me that, she said, the first time we met, she was so afraid that I was going to ask her where she got her degree from. I said, why? I said, let me tell you, that would be one of the last questions that I asked a person, because she said, I was afraid because I didn't want to tell you that I didn't have a degree. I never would have known it. She's a very professional woman, But I said, I've been there and done that, walked in those shoes, so I know what that feels like. So that's why, that's not a question that I ask somebody right off. Because to me, that's not a prerequisite for who you are. And so, anyway.
Your education is a part of you, but it's not you. It's your personality, who you are is you.
Yeah. So anytime I can give that testimony to somebody after that, because I said, I never know who needs to hear that. Because you can do it. If I could do it, like I told you, I was a shy child. But if you can do it, and it doesn't mean it's not, like you say, it doesn't mean that's who you are. I have supervised a lot of people who have degrees at the yin yang, and
I mean, you mentioned the guy who got a degree in accounting, and you still had to train him, you still had to teach him.
Oh, what is this?
Seriously, you're just like,
yeah, but that's so, with my kids, both of them have degrees, and my daughter, she got her law degree from Harvard, and they are well educated, but it never was something that, and that it's funny because I said, what is y'all? They said it never was. It was always understood. They knew what my story was. They say it was always understood that we needed to get our education, and it was never a question. I said, but I never pushed that on. They said, no, but we knew education was important, and we knew that what we wanted to do would require that, and we did what we needed to do. And they were both, they had no trouble in school at all. But then they didn't grow up in a time when things were, the same kind of challenges that I was dealing with. And there were people who grew up with me who got there, who were successful. But it just wasn't for me to come that route. I had to go the other route. And I honestly feel like that overall, I have a broader education because I have all that experience that I could bring into my schoolwork, which really was, it really helped me just having had those experiences to get, things, writing. I've written so many grants and stuff, but anyway.